Hi, I'm Simon Tells Tales, and this is the second in my 5-part series of videos looking at TSR's 1996 campaign setting, Netheril Empire of Magic by Slade with Jim Butler. In the first video, we followed the founding of the Netheril Empire and ended with the discovery of the Nether Scrolls. In this video, we'll be looking at the height of the Netheril Empire itself, with following videos looking at its fall, before exploring the campaign setting and ending with some great story hooks if you want to launch your own Netheril campaign. When we were together last, we were looking over the shoulder of a young Netherese who had discovered the Nether Scrolls. Now, however, let us travel along the plains and hills that line the inner sea and return to Severnton. Gone are the palisades that were built to guard that vulnerable collection of fishing villages from orc attacks. The orc attacks still come, but the villages have now expanded and bonded together with thick stone walls. Where one fisherman once stood with crude steel weapons, now an army of mages stands ready to unleash the raw energy of the weave on anyone foolish enough to approach. Step with me into Severnton itself, and we will slip past the artificers' shops where crafters make use of magics to make their work go faster, and school halls where teachers give lessons on the Nether Scrolls and the secrets contained within. And together, you and I will slip in through the windows of a dark study lined with books and obscure devices. Here, a young man stands in front of a tall bench, his features pinched, as he whispers arcane words that cause the air to crackle with magical energy all around him. We are now 845 years after the founding of the Netheril Empire, and the man in front of us is Ireland. He will go on to have one of the longest lives of any mortal creature in the realms, and he will become its second strongest mage. Watch as Ireland reaches into the weave itself. His fingers now become translucent as they transcend time and space. He plunges his hands into a vortex that opens up before him before stepping back, further and further into the room as a strange shape starts to emerge in front of him. He pulls this shape out of the vortex and into his study, purple lightning streaking across the room, scorching the edges of books, sending some tumbling to the floor. A whirling roar fills the room and escapes out into the streets outside as Ireland moves further and further backwards before staggering, exhausted, as a cloudy ball of crystal, 150 feet in diameter, pulls itself through the vortex and into the room, almost filling it. We are bearing witness here to the most significant advance in the Empire of Netheril since the discovery of the Nether Scrolls, an invention that will pave the way for things to come. Ireland has created the first Mythaller. This device allows mages to reach deep into the weave to get access to raw, unfiltered magic. It will allow the Netherese to create magical items without a spell of permanency, and it will provide a constant magical force. With this device, the Netherese can create quasi-magical items that will behave as if they are permanent just so long as they are within 1 mile of the Mythaller. This single act will rapidly increase the quantity of magical devices within the realm and the scope of what its mages can accomplish. So now, let us look outside of Ireland's workshop in the moment of this discovery. As the people of Severnton stand, staring at the walls of the workshop, feeling the magical current emanating from within, we'll pull away from the crowd to see Severnton from the air, as along its streets the people have stopped for a moment, aware of the changes that are taking place within their empire. If we pull back high enough in the air that we can turn our eyes towards the horizon, we will see trailing strands of smoke, however, the evidence of orc attacks. Over the coming years, the fire and smoke of these orc attacks spread further and further across the Empire of Netheril. Each time the orcs strike, they are beaten back, but never for long. This is about to change though, and we can see it happen. We will move now over the fields and the plains that lead west from Severnton, where farmers stay alert for the signs of impending orc attacks. Beyond those fields are the Channel Mountains, the range of peaks that spread across the narrow sea itself like some half-completed bridge. There, amongst those rocky peaks, is Ireland. We are now 866 years from the start of the Netheril Empire, and Iarlaith stands facing the peak of a mountain, his arms outstretched as he shouts out incantations into the wind. The very air seems dark and heavy and thick. Arcs of eldritch lightning crackle across the sky before the heavy air itself seems to split. With one great crack, the tip of the mountain facing Ireland becomes sheared off as he casts an 11th level spell. As the mountain top breaks free and begins to fall, the mage calls out a new string of incantations, and the mountain top stops before levitating up into the air and twisting around so that its flattened base points down towards the ground. Watch as Ireland extends his hands as he rises up towards this floating plateau, landing on it and surveying his handiwork with his smile, before plunging those hands into the arcane weave of the world and ripping forth another Mythaller, a pearly globe that will make the levitation spell upon this mountain top permanent. This is the base of Netheril's first floating city, Ireland's enclave. More will follow, and those mages who create these floating cities will be deemed archmages, and they will use their growing powers to add centuries to their lifespans. Step forward in time with me though, and look out across the sky from a high balcony on Ireland's central tower. We are now 1038 years after the founding of the Netheril Empire, and the Empire's 13th city has taken into the air. But despite the centuries that have passed, Ireland only seems to have aged 10 years. More centuries pass now, as Ireland's face stretches and ages, falling gaunt around him in a tight and pale rictus. But he does not die. 1652 years after the founding of the Empire, Netheril is now at the peak of its power, and the Channel Mountains and the Abbey Mountains over in the west are strewn with flat-peaked mountain tops that archmages have shown off in order to create the bases of their cities. Now, a new city rises into the air every single year, and seeing their dark-spired shapes filling the sky, you might be forgiven for not noticing the smoke in the fields and the woodlands below. As the Netherese Empire grows in power, so too does the level of conflict with its enemies, orcs and non-humans. Even its own people are beginning to turn against it. Come swooping down from the skies and towards the dark stone spires of the city of Severnton, where dark basalt and stained glass mark the shape of the most holy and magical chamber of Ireland the demi-divine. This great chamber of worship was built in honour of Ireland, and it is a marvel to behold the dark basalt built and shaped using architectural skills known only to the masters of the arcane arts. But something attracts our attention. Shouts, cries, the clashing of steel, and a magical force shattering windows. We rush in now through a shattered window to see the shapes of 9 hooded men fighting back against guards as they rush towards the chamber's exit with sacks attached to their backs. And from inside the sacks come the glinting, shimmering shapes of 25 pieces of the Nether Scrolls. Against all odds, the men manage to escape out into the streets, and they soon lose themselves in the arcane shifting shadows that spread around Severnton. The scrolls are never to be discovered again, even though every archmage in the kingdom searches for them. The thieves will beat the pieces down into 25 unrecognisable gold nuggets and sell them for less than a fraction of their true value. Time passes swiftly now, moving over the Netheril Empire like sheets of rain in a tempest. Ireland will become a dark shadow, embracing leechdom in an effort to extend his life, and this is a dark magic ritual that other archmages across the empire will fall into as well. And the sheer number of floating cities in the sky now will begin to block out the sun. The empire must expand its reach. And 3,163 years after the founding of the empire, a child is born on one of these floating cities, a child who will go on to seal the fate of the great empire of skybound cities. Karsus. We will meet him now, a precocious child in the school of arcane magics, his mind quick to grasp the concepts of magical complexities in books, a child who revels in his ability to question and correct his teachers. It does not make him a popular child, but that does not seem to bother him. After his classes, he will head to the library, but instead of following him there, we will turn and jump off the edge of this flying city and soar across the sky and the years. Because at the age of 22, Karsus has become the youngest archmage ever. And we will travel to his floating city now. See it there, larger and more decadent, its spires spiralling and falling in on themselves in ways that defy the laws of physics. Buildings floating, moving, shifting on top of its surface, as if the entire construct were an experiment or a cry of intellectual defiance. Today, we see Karsus stood by the city's edge. It hovers in the sky not far from the town of Seventon, and leaving Seventon is a great caravan of wagons, horses, armed barbarians from the north, and mages. Karsus has convinced the Council of Seventon to loan him the remaining Nether Scrolls. He's asked for this so that he can study them, to see if there's a magical connection between them all that he can use to find the missing scrolls, and he watches their approach, barely able to conceal his excitement. For conceal his excitement he must. Although we cannot see the details from our position in the sky, we can see the sudden movement of dark shapes. The blasts of crimson and dark indigo with spells wreak havoc across the landscape. We hear sounds of screaming on the wind. Karsus grips the edge of the city tight as he cries out, but is ultimately powerless. For within minutes there is a silence and a stillness that spreads across the ground below. The remaining Nether Scrolls are stolen, and in the years that follow, no matter how hard the archmages try, they are never recovered. Thank you. I'm Simon Tells Tales, and I hope you've enjoyed this retelling of the prime of the Netheril Empire as first written down in TSR's 1996 release, Netheril Empire of Magic by Slade with Jim Butler. This is the second in my 5-part series looking at that campaign, and when we meet again, we'll be looking at what caused the downfall of this great civilization. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button below and subscribe for more videos exploring some of the classic Forgotten Realms settings. If you have a favourite out there that you'd love me to cover as well, let me know in the comments below. And until then, I bid you farewell, and we'll meet again when we look at the downfall of this great empire.